5 tips to better vibrato. Let's add some flavor to your tone. Hi, and welcome to the Saxophone Academy. I'm Dr. Wally Wallace, and if you're interested in saxophone masterclasses and product reviews, please do subscribe and be sure to hit the like button to add more vibe into your vibrato. It's the best I could come up with. Work with me. Now today we're going to be talking about 5 tips to make your vibrato better. Now if you need to learn how to do vibrato, that's part 1 video that I'll put a link down below. Also down below, I'm going to put a link to the sheet music and the performance of the tune we're using as a vibrato study today, so you can download all the goodies. So if you need part 1, the mechanics of how to do vibrato, watch that video, and make sure you download and watch the full video of the performance of what we're using today for our examples of how to apply vibrato in context. Tip number 1, which isn't really a tip, it's a non-negotiable law, is listening. It's the master key, as we call it here in the Saxophone Academy. Listening is the master key. By listening, we create the expectant mold in which you pour all your time and talents and practice. Without having that exemplar, that idea of what you're shooting for, your practice will be scattered and your time and talents won't be channeled into the end result that you're looking for. There's no substitute for listening. And that's good news as well, because listening should be the most enjoyable part of your practice. In general, in an ideal world, I recommend listening twice as much as you practice. Now, that doesn't mean sitting down for a practice session, listening for 2 hours and practice for 1, but sneaking in listening time throughout your day. Who should you be listening to? Well, that's up to you, but what I would like you to do is please pop down in the comments below. Let me know whose vibrato you really love listening to, whose vibrato do you emulate, and that's going to help out our community, our Saxophone Academy. So post it down below, your favorite player, your favorite recording, and it's going to help everybody out. There is no substitute for listening, and in today's lesson, we actually have a performance and the sheet music that we're going to be doing of Misty Planet, our contrafact built off of Misty, as a good example so you can read some sheet music and practice vibrato in context. But reading the sheet music isn't nearly as important as listening. Tip number 2, start with straight tone. Now, I don't mean in the stylistic application, meaning always start your notes straight then add vibrato. I mean in the mechanics of practicing, start with a full straight tone before you add vibrato. Here's why. The biggest trap that players fall into is when they add vibrato, they back off the airstream. Now, at times that's ideal at the end of a note, especially if you're doing a subtone, emulating Stan Getz, for instance. But in general, we want to add a vibrato to an existing full, beautiful tone. I hear it time and time again. Students start to learn vibrato, they back off the airstream and it makes the vibrato saggy. No part of our playing should be saggy. That's just not a word I want to hear related to saxophone playing. So to avoid the saggy, let's not say the word saggy anymore. In order to avoid that kind of lackluster, lazy sound, we want to make sure we're not altering our airstream. This is where straight tone comes in. So when you're first learning to practice vibrato, or when I practice it every day, I will start with a straight tone. Full, big, beautiful, well-supported sound. Add vibrato to that. And again, it's critical you do not back off the airstream. You start straight tone. The whole point of starting straight tone as the training exercise is that you keep your airstream full and consistent, then add to it. Think of the airstream like your Christmas tree. You add the ornaments, the vibrato, to that. You don't want that sad Charlie Brown Christmas tree. I know there was like a lesson or some moral of the story, but that was a sad Christmas tree. We want a big, full, non-saggy. Okay, there's saggy again. We want a big, lush Christmas tree that we add ornaments to. Big airstream, then we add our vibrato. So practice straight tone, adding it without backing off the air. Got the point? Okay, good. Tip number 3, vary your usage and application of vibrato. We're going to take a listen to our sheet music that we're using today as this example. It's a performance of On a Misty Planet by my band, the sonanot. So I'm going to play the melody, and I want you to listen to 3 applications. Additive, starting straight tone, adding it. Immediate, starting immediately with vibrato, obviously, and none. None's an important part of the vibrato process as well. So listen to the opening phrase and see if you can identify where I'm using which, and then we'll break it down. So now I'm going to play it again in isolation and going to give you a little cheat sheet so you can see in this musical phrase how I chose where to apply what and when. So hearkening back to the master key, we have to listen. I don't want you to guess where or how to use vibrato. I want it to be instinctual through many, 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 many thousands of hours of listening. Tip number 4, practice structured to sound free. It's kind of a conundrum, but in order to sound free and fluid as we want our vibrato to sound, we do not want it to sound mechanical. I'm sure we've all heard some player at some point that sounded kind of mechanical, like a robot was stirring up X number of pulsations per beat. That's obviously not what we're after. But it's kind of counterintuitive, but in order to sound free and fluid, we have to train rigidly. Think of the boxer with the timing bag. That's not literally how they fight in the ring. It's just a training exercise. I assume I've never boxed. But we need to train our fine jaw muscles. These muscles are making tiny little controlled motions, and it requires rigid practice. So, of course, we're going to turn on our metronome, and then I'd like you to practice 3 and 4 pulsations per beat. So you put on your metronome starting around 60, and then I'm going to snap. It's not going to be anywhere close to 60 because I'm not a metronome, obviously. But you'll put on your metronome, and then vo, 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 vo. Triplets. And if you want to know the mechanic and the syllable I'm using, watch part 1 of the vibrato video. We also practice 4 pulsations per beat. Vo, 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 vo. Always with a full airstream. So we have to practice mechanically, and then when you turn the metronome off and practice a musical line, these muscles, because the jaw is creating the vibrato, watch the part 1 video, we train our jaw to be able to do whatever we want. And if you practice 3 pulsations and 4 pulsations per beat, I think that's going to train the muscle enough. I have colleagues that practice 5 and 7. I'm not that smart. I can't do that. I don't think anybody got time for that. If you want to do 5 and 7 pulsations per beat, great. But I think 3 and 4 is good training, and then using our ears and listening to recordings. Tip number 5, practice your vibrato full range. Here's why. When you're playing low B flat and you move your jaw, as perhaps you've seen when you try to bring a note in tune, in the low end, jaw motion, embouchure motion, voicing motion has not that big of an effect on the changing of the pitch. So when we drop our jaw for vibrato, and again, the mechanics are in part 1, when we drop our jaw for vibrato in the low end, it doesn't create that much of a change. But if we apply that same jaw motion to a palm key, for instance, it's going to dip a quarter tone or below. So as we go higher, our jaw motion becomes smaller and more refined, but the pulsation change will remain somewhat the same if we're doing our job correctly. So we have to practice over the full range of the instrument, which means we can't always start practicing vibrato in the comfortable range and then move on. Now you can vary the days. Some days you may work on the low end, some days on the high end. Arpeggios and folk songs where we have leaps are a great way to do that. So also, don't always practice linear scale motions or chromatic motions, which I do love a good chromatic exercise with vibrato. Practice leaps and skips. I personally like to do this with jazz standards. Take Stella by Starlight in all 12 keys. If you're there, if you're not there, don't stress. You could do Mary Had a Little Lamb or something else, or just any of your favorite tune that covers a lot of range. But we want to practice the palm keys, altissimo if you're a very advanced player, and the low end as well, because the jaw motion that we use for low D is very different than the jaw motion we use for palm key D. So practice in a variety of ranges, and don't just practice scale motion, practice leaps as well, to practice from going from the big jaw motion to the small jaw motion with very little time in between. Now, the rest of this month and a lot of winter, we've got lots of tone exercises coming up. We're going to talk about general tone, long tone studies, and even have a video dark like Desmond. I'm going to teach you how to get that Paul Desmond warm, dark sound. I'm excited about that video coming up in a couple of weeks. So in the meantime, make sure you are subscribed to get all the goodies. Download the PDF, watch the video of the performance and download the PDF. I'll put a link below, and I'll see you very soon. But you need to go practice.